Only 4 sitcoms in the entire history of television have had every lead cast member win an Emmy. All in the Family, Will and Grace, Schitt's Creek, and a show about 4 women, average age right around 60, living together in Miami. If you know which show that is, you already know this one's worth sticking around for. Subscribe now, because this story goes places you won't expect. Nobody thought it would work. A comedy about older women? In 1985? On Saturday night? Every executive who heard the pitch had the same answer. Who's going to watch that? Tens of millions of people. Every single week. The Golden Girls didn't just survive. It ran for 180 episodes across 7 seasons. It took on AIDS. It took on ageism. It took on everything polite television was afraid to touch. And it did all of it with cheesecake and punchlines. 2 Best Comedy Emmys, 4 individual acting Emmys, and an audience that still hasn't let go, more than 3 decades after the finale. Now, here's the part that should bother you. In the best way. One of those 4 women was never supposed to play the role she became famous for. She was cast as a completely different character. But midway through the audition, the director stopped her, told her to read the other part instead. She did. And that single switch, that one moment in a casting room, rewired the entire show. The woman on the other end of that swap? She later wrote that she was heartsick. She didn't know who her new character was, had no clue what to do with her. That character would go on to become one of the most beloved figures in sitcom history. And the woman behind her would still be making people laugh at 88, when 500,000 strangers on the internet demanded she take a stage she'd never stood on before. She said yes. She won an Emmy for it. We'll get to her, and we'll get to the date. 17 days before 100. But first, number 6. A man whose first career was as far from Hollywood as you can get. He had a PhD. He was a professor. And then he walked into a theater and never looked back. Valedictorian, Cornell University, a PhD in theater, a professorship at the University of Illinois. Harold Gould had the kind of resume that made parents proud and universities fight over him. He was teaching. He was publishing. He had the security of academia in a world where actors starved. He walked away from all of it. Somewhere in the 1950s, Gould decided that talking about plays wasn't enough. He wanted to be inside them. So the professor left the lecture hall, moved to New York, and started auditioning like a man half his age with none of his credentials. It worked, slowly. Then not so slowly. By the 70s, if you watched television, you'd seen Harold Gould. You just didn't know his name. He was the con man sitting across from Paul Newman and Robert Redford in The Sting. He was Rhoda Morgenstern's father on Mary Tyler Moore and the spin-off Rhoda. 300 television appearances, 5 Emmy nominations. The kind of actor directors called first and audiences recognized last. Then came the Golden Girls. Gould stepped in as Miles Weber, Rose Nyland's professor boyfriend, across the show's final 3 seasons. Gentle, steady. The man who made Rose believe she could fall in love again after losing Charlie. Off-screen, he'd married Lair Vernon in 1950. They stayed together for 60 years, until the day he left us. Harold Gould was 86. Not a bad second career for a man who started as a professor. But if you think a PhD turned actor is an unlikely path to the Golden Girls, wait. Because the man at number 5 got to Hollywood in a way nobody could make up. It involves a taxi, a passenger, and a fare that changed everything. And somewhere ahead in this story, there's something about one of the 4 Golden Girls themselves that doesn't quite add up. Something about her age, about who she was really playing. A mother who was younger than her own daughter. New York City, 1963. A yellow cab cuts through midtown traffic, behind the wheel. A 6'5", prematurely bald college dropout from Brooklyn who once wanted to be a veterinarian. He'd tried Cornell, dropped out. Tried Brooklyn College, dropped out again. Managed a hotel, drove a cab, 29 years old and running out of plans. A man gets in the back seat. He's headed downtown. They talk. The passenger asks what the driver really wants to do. The driver says he wants to act. The passenger is Mike Nichols, the director. Within months, Herb Edelman is standing on a Broadway stage in Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park. He'll reprise the role in the 1967 film alongside Robert Redford and Jane Fonda. A year later, he's Murray, the cop in the movie version of Simon's The Odd Couple. The cab driver from Coney Island is suddenly a working actor, and he won't stop working for 3 decades. But the role that stuck? Stanley Zbornak. Stan, Dorothy's ex-husband, the toupee, the the schemes, the knock on the door that always meant trouble. 26 episodes across all 7 seasons of The Golden Girls. Every time Edelman walked onto that set, Bea Arthur's slow-building glare of disgust brought the house down before he'd finished his first line. He earned 2 Emmy nominations for it, 1987 and 88. Herb Edelman left us in 1996. He was 62. The man who almost became a vet, who drove a cab, who picked up the right passenger on the right night. If you're watching this, do me a favor. Tell someone about this channel, because these stories deserve to be heard, and every share means we get to keep telling them. Now, remember what I said earlier about something that doesn't add up? Number 4 played a woman in her 80s, the sharp-tongued Sicilian mother who stole every scene she walked into. Audiences assumed she was the oldest member of the cast. She wasn't. She wasn't even close. Here's the math. Bea Arthur, the woman who played Dorothy, the daughter, was born May 13th, 1922. Estelle Getty, the woman who played Sophia, Dorothy's mother, was born July 25th, 1923. Read those dates again. The mother was younger than the daughter by 1 year and 2 months. Every single episode. For 7 years, audiences never knew. Getty walked into that audition room wearing orthopedic shoes, a whitened wig, and an oversized polyester dress. She was 62 years old, playing 80, and she'd been waiting her entire life for that moment. For nearly 5 decades, Estelle Getty worked the New York theater circuit. Small stages, small parts, small paychecks. She raised 2 sons, held a day job, and kept auditioning, year after year, decade after decade, without ever catching a break. Her father didn't think she'd make it. Most people didn't. Then Harvey Fierstein wrote a play called Torch Song Trilogy. He wrote the role of the mother specifically for her. She was 59. The reviews were electric. A Drama Desk nomination followed. 3 years of Broadway and touring runs. And the producers of a new NBC sitcom about 4 women in Miami noticed. The pilot taping was April 17th, 1985. 5 actors performed. 4 women and 1 man. A cook named Coco. The audience responded politely to most of the cast. But when the small woman in the orthopedic shoes opened her mouth, something different happened. The laughter wasn't polite. It was involuntary. The kind that catches you off guard because the line was funnier than it had any right to be. By the end of that taping, the producers had made their decision. The cook was out. Sophia was in. Permanently. Getty won the Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series in 1988. She won a Golden Globe. She became the scene stealer that 4 decades of theater had always promised she could be. And she did it all while nobody in the audience realized she was younger than the woman calling her Ma. In her later years, Getty stepped away from the screen. The wit that had made Sophia untouchable was dimming. Her co-stars said that by 2004, she could no longer recognize them. Estelle Getty left us on July 22nd, 2008. She was 84, 3 days before her 85th birthday. Her headstone at Hollywood Forever Cemetery reads, "With love and laughter." She waited nearly 60 years for her moment, and when it came, she made every second of it count. Now. Number 3 is the woman who convinced America she was the most confident Southern belle on television, even though she grew up in Oklahoma and had to be talked into the part. And number 2, the tallest, sharpest, most commanding presence in the cast. The woman who could end a scene with nothing but a look, before she was any of that, before Maud, before Dorothy, before any stage or screen. She was Staff Sergeant Bernice Frankel, United States, Marine Corps, truck driver. She denied it for the rest of her life. My first 5 husbands, and the ones who got away. That's the title of a real book, published 2007, written by the woman who played the most confident, most glamorous, most shamelessly self-assured Southern belle in the history of television. If that title doesn't tell you everything you need to know about Rue McClanahan, nothing will. She wasn't from Georgia. She wasn't from the Carolinas. Rue McClanahan was born in Healdton, Oklahoma, a small town where her mother was a beautician and her father was a building contractor. She made her first stage appearance at 4 years old in a local production of The 3 Little Kittens. By the time she left the University of Tulsa with a drama degree, she was already heading for New York. Her Broadway debut came in 1969, Jimmy Shine, sharing the stage with a young Dustin Hoffman. But the call that changed her trajectory came from Norman Lear. He'd cast half the actors in this video, and now he wanted McClanahan. First as a guest on All in the Family, then as Vivian Harmon, the sweet, scatterbrained neighbor on Maud, working opposite the woman who would one day be her golden girl, Bea Arthur. So when the Golden Girls came together in 1985, Bea McClanahan already knew two of her co-stars. But she almost didn't get the part that made her a legend. Producers wanted her to play Rose. She'd played Vivian, sweet and ditzy, on Maude. The logic was obvious. It was obvious to everyone except Rue. She read the pilot script and felt it in her chest. Blanche was hers, but the producers handed her Rose, and she bit her tongue. She sat in the audition room, reading lines she knew weren't right, waiting for someone to see what she already saw. Midway through, pilot director Jay Sandrich stopped the reading, looked at her, and asked her to try the other part. She picked up the Blanche pages. The accent came out. Not Georgia, not the Carolinas, but something warmer. Oklahoma underneath, honey on top. The room shifted. The next day, Betty White read as Rose, and the show locked into place. Bea McClanahan won the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series in 1987. 1 year after White, 1 year before Arthur. She kept every single outfit she wore as Blanche on the show. Every dress, every blouse, every pair of heels. She wore them off-set as her everyday clothes until the day she left us. Rue McClanahan left us on June 3rd, 2010. She was 76. The girl from Oklahoma who told America she was from Atlanta. And America believed every word. February 18th, 1943. 5 days since the United States Marine Corps began accepting women for the very first time. A 20-year-old woman in New York sits down and writes a letter. She explains that she'd been working at a packaging company, interning at a hospital. She'd tried lab work. She didn't like it. She found an office job at a loan company but couldn't support herself. She was supposed to start a new job that week. She never showed up. Instead, she wrote one sentence that would remain buried in the National Archives for the next 67 years. She'd heard that enlistments for women in the Marines were open and decided the only thing to do was join. Her name was Bernice Frankel. She trained as a typist at Marine headquarters in Washington. Then she requested a transfer to motor transport school at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. A girl from New York City, who probably had never driven much of anything, asked to become a truck driver. They said yes. She drove. She dispatched. She climbed. Private first class by May, corporal by July, sergeant by December, staff sergeant by January 1945. Honorable discharge that September. Along the way, she married a fellow Marine named Robert Arthur. The marriage didn't last. The name did. Almost. She dropped the U. Arthur sounded better on a marquee. What followed was one of the most remarkable stage-to-screen careers in American history. Yente the Matchmaker in the original Broadway production of Fiddler on the Roof, a Tony Award for playing Vera Charles in Mame, and then Norman Lear came calling. He'd been watching. He wanted her for a guest spot on All in the Family, as Maud Findlay, Edith Bunker's outspoken cousin. Bea Arthur was 49 years old. The CBS executives looked at each other and asked one question. Who is that? Give her a show. Maud ran for 6 seasons. Arthur won the Emmy in '77. The show made history with a 2-part episode in which Maud decides to have an abortion. A storyline so charged that dozens of affiliates refused to broadcast it. Television had never done anything like it. Arthur didn't flinch, and then came Dorothy Zbornak, the tall one, the smart one, the one who could dismantle a punchline with nothing but a stare. Arthur took the role in 1985, won her second Emmy in '88, and after 7 seasons decided she was done. The show couldn't survive without her. The finale, Dorothy marrying Blanche's uncle, played by Leslie Nielsen, drew 27 million viewers. Here's what nobody knew at the time. Before the Tony, before the Emmy, before any of it, Staff Sergeant Bernice Frankel had driven trucks for the Marines. And when interviewers asked her about it decades later, she looked them in the eye and said it never happened. Her official military file became public in 2010, a year after she left us. Beatrice Arthur left us on April 25th, 2009. She was 86. They dimmed the Broadway marquees for her that night. 1 minute of darkness across every theater in New York. Betty White, her co-star for 7 years, said one thing when she heard the news. I knew it would hurt. I just didn't know it would hurt this much. Now, number 1. The woman Betty White was talking about when she said those words, the woman whose absence she was already dreading, was White herself. Because when Bea Arthur left the show and then left the world, it was Betty who stayed. Longer than any of them, longer than anyone expected. So long that the question stopped being whether she'd keep going and became whether she'd make it to 100. She didn't, but not for the reason you think. 1961, a game show set. The show is called Password, and the host is a man named Alan Ludden. One of the celebrity guests that week is a television actress. Blonde, quick, funny, already well known from her own sitcom a decade earlier. She's been in the business since 1949. She is not looking for a husband. He proposed. She said no. He proposed again. She said no again. He kept asking. She kept refusing. She didn't want to leave Los Angeles. He was based in New York. It was impossible. She said yes in 1963. They were married for 18 years, until the morning in 1981 when Alan Ludden left this world. Betty White never remarried. When people asked why, she had one answer. Once you've had the best, who needs the rest? That was Betty White, born January 17th, 1922, in Oak Park, Illinois. The only child of an electrical engineer and a homemaker, raised in Los Angeles from the age of 2. She wanted to be a forest ranger. She became something else entirely. In 1949, she walked onto the set of Hollywood on television, a live daily show that burned through 2 male co-hosts before she took over alone. In 1953, she produced and starred in Life with Elizabeth, making her the first woman in America to produce a sitcom. In 1983, she became the first woman to win the Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Game Show Host. 7 decades, every one of them on camera. Nobody in the history of television has done what she did. And the role that defined her? She almost didn't play it. When The Golden Girls was being cast in 1985, the producers looked at Betty White and saw Sue Ann Nivens. The sharp, flirtatious character she'd played on the Mary Tyler Moore show a decade earlier. They gave her Blanche. It made sense on paper, but pilot director Jay Sandrich saw something else. He asked White and McClanahan to switch. White got Rose. She wrote later that she was heartsick. She had no idea who Rose was, had no clue what to do with a sweet, naive woman from a small town in Minnesota. Rose Nyland became one of the most beloved characters in the history of television. White was nominated for the Golden Girls Emmy every single season the show aired. She won in 1986. And then something happened that nobody, not even Betty White, could have predicted. She got older, she kept working, and the world fell in love with her all over again. In 2009, she appeared in The Proposal with Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds. In 2010, she starred in a Snickers commercial during the Super Bowl. And a 29-year-old fan in San Antonio started a Facebook page. Betty White to host SNL, please. By March, nearly 500,000 people had signed on. NBC said yes. On May 8th, 2010, at the age of 88, Betty White stepped onto the Saturday Night Live stage. 6 former cast members, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Maya Rudolph, Molly Shannon, Anna Gasteyer, Rachel Dratch, came back just for her. The episode pulled 12 million viewers, the highest SNL ratings in 18 months. She won her 7th Emmy. She kept going. Hot in Cleveland kept her on television for another 5 years. She won a Grammy. The Guinness Book recognized her for the longest television career by a female entertainer. She turned 90, then 95. The country stopped asking if she'd slow down and started counting. On Christmas Day, 2021, Betty White suffered a stroke. 6 days later, December 31st, she left us in her sleep at her home in Los Angeles. She was 99 years old, 17 days from 100. A documentary called Betty White. A celebration was released in theaters on January 17th, 2022. What would have been her 100th birthday? Audiences showed up anyway. They bought tickets to sit in the dark and remember a woman who had been on their screens since before most of them were born. Nobody saw that coming. Not the career, not the comeback, not the ending. Nobody, except maybe Rose Nyland, who always believed that the best things happen when you stop trying to plan them. Estelle Getty, 2008, the small one who waited 60 years for the spotlight and held it so fiercely that audiences forgot she was the youngest person on set. Bea Arthur, 2009, the Marine who became Maud, who became Dorothy. She could stop a room with one look. Broadway went dark for a minute when she left. Rue McClanahan, 2010. She walked out wearing Blanche's clothes. She never stopped. Betty White, 2021, 17 days short, 70 years on television, the last Golden Girl to leave the table. 4 women, 4 chairs, 1 kitchen, all empty now. The Golden Girls ran for 7 seasons. It won more awards than most shows dream of. It proved that 4 women over 60 could carry a network, and that the best comedy comes from people who've lived long enough to know what's funny and what actually matters. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment and tell me. Which golden girl was yours? And if you haven't already, subscribe. There's a whole cast of characters we haven't gotten to yet. I'll see you in the next one.